Now, this is not what you think. This is not one of those overnight success stories, not at all. But this is just a crazy, unexpected journey. If someone told me back then that one day I would become a content creator and make YouTube videos for people to watch, I would say, what? What's a content creator? So anyway, in this video, I want to share with you my story of how I quit my job in banking and finally became a content creator. And this video might be interesting and really useful to all those of you who are stuck in a job that you don't really like and thinking of doing something completely different. Or perhaps even several things. But you're still in doubt and you're not sure whether it's possible and you're just damn afraid. So let me tell you what happened, and I'll also share with you 3 key takeaways that I learned from this experience that might be useful on your own journey of changing careers, leaving your job and doing something completely different. So this was a really long process. It took me almost 10 years. In between these 2 points, I changed careers multiple times. I tweaked my career, I fine-tuned my career, I explored some of my interests, I launched projects, started new businesses, I succeeded at some things, I failed at many more things. So back then, a long time ago, I used to be this young banker. I had a successful banking career. I had this title of VP or Vice President, working in strategic business management, working on thousands of projects at the same time. I was outwardly successful. I had this prestigious title. I earned this big salary and even got these fat bonuses every year. But inside, I was just crumbling. I was just so deeply unhappy, unsatisfied, and unfulfilled. And at times, I just felt as though I would just sink into the ground. But I was a good employee. I followed the rules and I was confident that this company or that this banking industry would take care of my career and offer me this brilliant, interesting, promising career path. At least so I thought. Fast forward, now I am a content creator. I make videos on YouTube, and yes, at times I am also very exhausted. But the big difference here is, guys, that now I feel much more fulfilled in what I'm doing. Every day when I wake up, instead of just going on autopilot through my day, I have a very clear purpose. I know exactly what I'm doing, and I'm really looking forward to start my day, create content, and work on all these things that are difficult but really important to me. And most importantly, I work in the kind of working environment I thrive the most. I am self-employed, I occasionally do freelance work, I'm totally flexible, and I get to decide what the things are that I want to work on versus which things I don't want to waste my time on. And of course, all of these things come at a price, and you can't believe me how much suffering was involved in this process. But overall, I have to say that I am in a much better place now than I was before. But how did I get here? Let's start from the beginning. There was this really big obstacle that I had to face and that I was not really aware of in the beginning. And that was one of my own flaws or weaknesses. For too many years, I was relying way too much on the company I was working for my income, for a sense of status, and even identity. And like many people, and perhaps even you included, I just clung to it because it made me feel secure. So the first step in my journey that I had to take to make a change was to let go of that corporate mindset, or rather that employee mindset. And don't get me wrong, when we're talking about employee mindset, it's not about the fact that you're an employee, but rather it's the mindset where you can only see yourself as employee, as part of the company, and where you cannot see your life and, more importantly, your career outside of that context. So how did I get from banking to content creation? Back then, when I was still in banking, the thought of being a content creator never crossed my mind. And in fact, almost 10 years ago, that kind of job occupation didn't really exist yet. And one thing that I must say that really fueled this whole journey and moved it forward was that I explored my interest, even though I wasn't really sure whether or not I would end up in the right place. So still during my time in banking, while working in my day job, I started exploring my childhood interest and childhood dream in acting. I revisited this interest, started treating it a bit more seriously, and started thinking about what I should do about it. So I ended ended up taking an acting course after work in the evenings. And guys, that was such a life-changing experience. When I was rehearsing and performing, I really felt that I was becoming a different person. I was really expressing a part of me that all this while in banking I didn't have a chance to express. So that was the first really important realization to me, realizing that there is this set of skills, there are these interests that I really want to pursue that are interesting to me, and this experience really provided the contrast that I needed to this banking job that was becoming more and more bland and uninteresting to me. So over the course of a few years, I managed to fully let go of my banking job and focus on acting. During this time, I also had another big realization. I realized that I really wasn't the kind of person who liked to work with dozens and dozens of people every day on a continual basis. But that's exactly what I had to do when I was working in project management in banking. And that is why I set my mind to becoming self-employed. And that was a disaster, in the beginning at least. So naive as I was at the time, I thought that I would just quit my job and then just start my business and be successful. But it was really not like that at all. Long story short, I started a couple of businesses. I had some successes, but even more failures. And I just managed to break even and get my money back. And that was really such a big wake-up call. At the same time, I also started realizing that this acting business is really a damn hard thing to do. I got a few small acting gigs, but nothing more than that ever happened. But along with acting, my interest in film and filmmaking also grew at that time. So I decided to take matters into my own hands. So I combined my experience in acting and also my business management skills from my time in banking, and I decided to make my own feature films. So I made 2 of them, and I used my transferable skills that I got from my time in banking, which were making proposals, managing a business, to launch those projects. And making those films just opened up a whole new world to me. I just didn't know that this existed. And this was just so much fun, even though it was so exhausting. There were days where I only slept 3 or 4 hours, but the whole process was so fulfilling and I wanted to keep on doing it. The only big obstacle to me was that filmmaking really takes a long time. It requires a lot of patience, a long time to develop things, and it's also not that easy to get funding. But I just couldn't let go of my urge to create content, to make videos, to act in front of the camera. So shortly after I moved to Canada, that was around 2018-2019, that was a time where YouTube was really growing and there were a lot of up-and-coming content creators. And at that time, I didn't see myself as a content creator yet. I was just someone who had this interest, this urge to make videos, to create content, to write scripts, to edit material and present it to an audience, to you guys. At the same time, I thought that there were 1 or 2 things about my whole career journey that I thought might be useful to other people out there and that I would love to share. And that is how this channel, Multiple Careers, was born. And after that, my second channel, Living in Canada, as well as my Multiple Careers podcast. So over time, by exploring my interests, by giving different things a try, by testing and experimenting, by trying, succeeding and failing and so on, I finally got closer and closer to a career and also a life that was much more fulfilling and meaningful. And nowadays, I am so glad and grateful that I am able to spend my time making these videos every day. But as I said before, this is not an overnight change. It took all these different experiences, failures, successes, and twists and turns until I finally arrived here. Side note, at this point you might be wondering how I managed to stay afloat and how I made a living during these different experimentation phases. Well, that's a whole different topic for another video next time. By the way guys, in case you are currently at a point where you are dreading your job and you're thinking of doing something else but you don't really know what to do, where to start, how to go about it, I'm currently writing a book about that might help you with that, which I will launch early next year, so stay tuned for that. And you can also follow me on my Instagram, Multiple Careers, if you want to get further updates about that. So now let's get to the 3 key takeaways that I learned from my process of changing my career slowly but surely 180 degrees. The first thing is that finding what you want to do, you may call it your passion or your purpose, is not a one-time revelation. At least that's not the case for most people. So don't be misled by all these overnight success stories and glamour stories that tell you that, you don't like your job? Just just leave it and do this other thing and you'll be successful. No, instead it's likely going to be a long journey, a long process fraught with difficulties and challenges. At first, when you're trying to figure out what you want to do instead of this job you hate, you might think that you want to do A. But then in the process of experimenting with A, you might find out that A is not actually what you really want to do. But instead, this experience with A leads you to B, and then you try testing that out, and then you might find that B is not the right thing for you either, and then you move on to C. So it doesn't mean that you move on forever. It just means that in most cases, you cannot immediately find the thing. If you expect that, then you'll likely be disappointed. So to find and build a career that is fulfilling and meaningful to you, you need to stay curious. You need to continue exploring. You need to experiment in small ways that are not as risky. And if you continue to do this, at one point you will find work that you love. The second key takeaway I learned from this process is that you need to be aware of your flaws or your blind spots, and everyone has them. After a while of working in the same job and having the same routine every day, you get stuck in your ways and in a certain mindset. Every day you encounter the same people, you work with the same processes, and it becomes really, really difficult to imagine that there is another world that exists beyond that. That was exactly what happened to me. For too long in my banking job, I was unaware of all the other possibilities that existed. All that my mind was focused on was how I would get the next promotion, how would I advance in my banking career even at the same company. And I was really stuck on this route, and I was like a horse with these blinders on. The only stupid thing was that no one was forcing these blinders on me. I was the one who was putting the blinders on myself and just accepted the status quo. So if this also applies to you, then you really need to try and break this wall and see beyond this company that you're working for and even beyond this role that you're working in. But this is just one example of a flaw or a blind spot. There are many others. One big flaw, for example, that many people have is, for example, a lack of courage. You might just be very well aware of all the possibilities that exist in this world and you know exactly what you want to do, but your flaw happens to be that you lack the courage to take action because you're simply too afraid to take any risk or to possibly fail. But the truth is, guys, that without any failure, there cannot be any success. The third key takeaway from this whole process is that trying to find fulfilling and meaningful work is not the easy way out. At first glance, fulfilling work might sound like a wishy-washy term. It might sound soft, easy, and even fluffy, but let me tell you, it is not. In my experience, it is much, much easier to just work a corporate job and climb the corporate ladder. Why? Because in a corporation, everything is prepared for you. Of course, it is hard to climb the ladder and to advance, to get a promotion, to get a raise, but at least there's already a structure. There is something for you to work with. But it's a very different case when you're trying to find fulfilling work because there is no structure at all. The only limit to what kind of work you can do is your imagination and your courage and your persistence. Pursuing work that is fulfilling can actually be much, much harder because in most cases, fulfilling work will involve some kind of entrepreneurship or self-employment. When you pursue work that is fulfilling, you have to create your own path. You have to create your own rules. You have to set your own goals, set up your own schedule, your own milestones. No one tells you what you have to do, when to do it, and how to do it. And one of the hardest things to deal with when you are pursuing fulfilling work is that oftentimes you need to take a few steps back in order to move forward. And that can sometimes really mess with your ego. If right now you already have a certain position at a company, let's say you're a manager at some company, you are someone there. But if you chart out your own path or if you drastically change your career, in all likelihood, you have to learn a lot of things from the beginning. You need to be able to swallow your ego and start from the beginning again. By the way, guys, let me know where you are right now in your career. Do you love your job, hate your job, or is it just so-so? Is there perhaps something else in this life that you'd much rather do but simply don't have the guts to do? Please do let me know in the comments. I would really love to know. By the way, guys, I must admit that this version of my story of how I changed from banking to content creation is still a far too glossy of a story. In reality, it was much more messy, but this is only so much I can pack into a 10-12 minute video. So if you want to know more details, if you want to know more of the juicy details, then you need to check out my Multiple Careers podcast, because over there I talk about similar topics but in much more granular detail, and I also take a much more organic approach, during which sometimes a bit more embarrassing stories slip out. So check out my Multiple Careers podcast. I'd really love to see you there, and also drop me a comment while you're there. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope this video was useful to you, and I'll see you again pretty soon.